born for tonight where he'd be taken by Kyrie and Kratos. During the Festival of the Blaze, Sanctus will be assassinated by Dante where Nero will fight him. After a brief fight, Nero will gain the upper hand and would defeat Dante, who would escape moments later. Nero would make his way toward his headquarters, fighting several demons along the way, where he would discover Agnes's lab. After confronting Agnes, Nero would be taken out, but would be saved by the awakening of his Devil Trigger, as a result of the Yamal being restored. Eventually reaching headquarters, but would be attacked immediately by Kratos. Nero would defeat Kratos, but because of this, Kyrie would be taken captive by Agnes, and it wouldn't take long for Nero to find and fight Agnes, but before their fight could drag out any further, Sanctus would intervene to take Kyrie away. Nero would track down Sanctus, but would be defeated and sealed away within the statue as a source of power. However, Nero would be freed by Dante where he would defeat Sanctus and save Kyrie, as well as destroying the statue, where Dante will let Nero keep the Yamato. In their final moments, Nero asks if they will ever meet again, to which Dante vaguely waves. Cinder lived in an orphanage where she was constantly bullied by the other orphans and mistreated by the caretakers. However, one day she'll be adopted by Madame, but her torment will only continue where she'll be psychologically abused by her stepmother and constantly bullied by her stepsisters. However, when not being tormented, she would secretly train with a man named Rose, eventually gifting one of his swords to her. But late one night, one of her stepsisters would discover this, but Cinder would kill her stepmother and her stepsisters. Cinder would be confronted by Rose, who would fight her but would ultimately be defeated. At some point, Cinder would counter Salem and would work with her by completing her goals in exchange for power. Cinder would go on to recruit Emerald Sestre, Mercury Black, who also enlisted the criminal Roman Torchwick, and the White Fangler Am Taurus. However, her first attempt will fail, and after taking a portion of Falmer's power, she'll be interrupted by Crow before she could take any more. Cinder will take her team to pose as students for the upcoming Vile Tournament, where she will hack into the system during the tournament where she would rig a match, and with the help of Emerald's illusions, Hero would accidentally tear her opponent Penny apart during the Fall Beacon. She would track down Ozpin in the vault, and after finishing what she started, she would take what remaining power the Fallman had, who will also have a brief fight with the headmaster, Ozpin. After defeating him, she would be confronted by Pyrrha, and despite her efforts, she would be overpowered and defeated by Cinder. But as a result of this, Ruby's silver eyes would activate, severely wounding Cinder, losing her left arm and eye. After doing some training and getting used to her powers, Cinder would seal a deal with the bandit leader Raven Brennan, who would lead the attack on Haven. Cinder would head into the vault with Raven and Vernal, but would freeze Raven and kill Vernal in an attempt to take the Spring Maiden's powers. However, Raven would break free and would engage with Cinder. After a prolonged fight, Cinder would be bested by Raven. Afterwards, Raven would find a woman named Little Miss Malat, who would tell her about Team Ruby and Junior hanging into Atlas, but would be attacked by Neapolitan. After a brief scuffle, Cinder would propose that they should work together to take out Ruby. Neo would obtain an airship where the two would head to Atlas. After reaching Atlas, Cinder would have Neo infiltrate the Schnee Manor, where Cinder would trail Winter, Schnee, and Penny to the Winter's maiden's quarters, where she would outduel the two. However, Winter would retaliate to stop Cinder from taking the Winter Maiden's power, but would be injured. But thanks to Ruby and Weiss arriving, she would retreat to the Grimm Wheel to hand the Relic of Knowledge to Salem, who would request to hunt down the Winter Maiden, but her request would be denied. Out of frustration, she would break into a midi where she would attack Penny. Despite holding on pretty well, she would eventually be overpowered and defeated. As Team Ruby planned to use the Relic of Creation to transport the citizens of Mantle to Vacuo, Cinder would follow them, where she would fight the two teams. Neo would be successful in knocking Yang off the ledge, where she would face off against Ruby and Blake, while Cinder fought Penny again. As the fight would drag out, Cinder would take the Relic of Knowledge before knocking Neo and Ruby into the abyss. After this, Cinder will return to Salem, where the two leave the vault, where their journey continues. Well, what's up? We're here for another bonus match where I'll be pitting two hybrids against each other, with Nero, the son of Sparta, going against the Fall Maiden, Cinder. Now, due to nothing really changing on Cinder, so for Cinder's research, all of it would be coming from her last match with Virgil and Sephiroth. And the same goes for Nero. The only difference is that I'm using a revamped version of both scripts. And as a last note, if I sound any different than what I usually do, then the reason for that is my allergies are bothering me, so bear with me on this. So with that said, let's start with their physical capabilities. By the end of DMC 4, Nero being an 8-year-old boy standing around 6'2". Due to taking out swarms of demons, Nero keeps himself in great shape. He's traded blows as well overpowered Dante. However, during their first fight, Dante underestimated Nero and more seemed to be toying with him. Much like Dante, Nero will more condition himself in strength. He's blocked an attack from Burial and overpowered a swarm of prototype Angelos. Speed-wise, he's dodged attacks from demons and kept pace with Dante. As far as durability goes, Nero has traded blows with Dante. He's been impaled several times, but much like the Sons of Sparta, if Nero takes too much damage, his healing factor will wear down, and with the right amount of damage, he'll be defeated. By the end of Volume 8, Cinder will likely be in her mid-20s, standing around 4'7" in great shape. She's easily overpowered Winter, who on her own slammed Crow to the ground so hard that formed a crater. During her fight with Raven, the two of them clashed blazes that were strong enough to shake the environment around them. Speed-wise, she kept pace with Osmond, who's moved fast enough to create after images. As well as Raven, and again during their fight, the two of them fought on falling debris that took place in only seconds. Durability wise, Cinder survived having debris collapse on her, as well as survived being encased in ice, as well as taking elemental damage from Penny. These two hybrids are certainly powerful, but to me, one of them just has a bit more going at them. On one hand, when it comes to strength, it's honestly a bit of a toss-up, but I'm more leaning towards Nero since he would have a bit more going at him. Cinder and Raven creating Shockwave is impressive, but I find Nero clashing with powerful demons and even holding his own against Dante more impressive. Speed, I'll slightly give it to Cinder. Sure, Nero can keep pace with demons, but Cinder would at best scale to Raven, who casually kept pace with her on falling debris that took place in only seconds, as well as dodge a shot from Crow and Burf. Durability easily goes to Nero. He's been impaled, thrown around, and has gotten right back up. But I will give Cinder points for taking elemental damage and survive having debris collapse on her. By the end of the day, while Cinder would hold her own pretty well, and despite having a speed advantage, it's Nero who will remain ahead as the battle drags on. So I give Nero the edge in physical capabilities. Nero carried only 3 weapons. His first is the sword dubbed the Red Queen. The Red Queen blade is a modified version of the blade used by the Order of the Sword that was designed by Agnes. The blade's handle was modified to have a motorcycle-like gear shift to heat up the blade to amplify its attack for every charge. However, this did take time to do. Nero also carried his Blue Rose revolver. The Blue Rose revolver has an over and under style barrel design. Nero can fuse his shots with his demonic magic to make his shots more powerful. But again, this did take time. His last weapon, dubbed the Yamato, once used by Virgil, the blade is infused with demonic magic that is said to cut through anything, including souls. However, I don't think that Nero isn't close to mastering the true functions of the Yamato like Virgil once did. Cinder carries an average amount of weapons that she can materialize at will. She carries 2 broadswords, a spear, a knife, and lastly a bow and arrow. The weapon seems to have a fire element, but to me this seems to be assisted by her semblance. Other than that, Cinder can fire 3 arrows at a time and can create copies of her blades to fire off in a barrage. On paper, this would seem clear-cut, but it is complicated once you get into specifics. On one hand, Nero's Red Queen certainly packs more of a punch than Cinder's sword. The Red Queen has better range, and its gear shift allows Nero to add more damage per each strike, depending on how much Nero amps his blade. For range, Cinder takes it without doubt. Cinder can fire more than 1 arrow than Nero, and her bow has overall better range. And unlike Nero, Cinder herself can transfer power into her weapons just much more faster. But what breaks this tie is how each combatant uses their weapons. And unfortunately, Cinder takes it. Much like Virgil when wielding his Yamato and Force Edge, Cinder uses a Jarkai style when wielding her swords. Her blades may not be able to pack as much of a punch as Nero's Red Queen blade, but her semblance fixes that. as I'll mention in a bit. And some of you are probably wondering why I didn't mention the Yamato, and that's mainly because the fact that Nero can only use the Yamato when he activates his Devil Trigger, and that likely won't be until the late stages of the fight. So in the meantime, I give Cinder the edge in weapons. Nero has a small yet effective selection of abilities. The first is his demonic arm dubbed the Devilbringer. The arm is in short basically a grappling hook. The Devilbringer allows Nero to pull enemies towards him or slams them around like a ragdoll. His Devil Trigger creates a spectral version of his inner demon that allows him to attack twice per every strike and can set off energy blades for every time he fires his Blue Rose revolver. Just like all huntresses, Cinder has her aura and semblance. Aura is a manifestation of one's soul to buff their strength, heals them, or dampen damage. Her semblance allows her to heat up her weapons to make them explode when coming into contact with her opponent, but should she overuse her semblance, it will drain her aura, leaving her defenseless. After obtaining the full power of the Fall Maiden, Cinder was granted several abilities, such as Flight to grant her bear mobility, and the ability to freely use elemental magic. However, Cinder mainly preferred to use fire and rarely use wind, and during her fight with Raven, she was also shown to create blaze out molten rock, as well as the ability to amp her physical performance by using her magic. She also has a grimm arm that can be stretched out to grab her opponents. And lastly, her final ability is the ability to disintegrate her opponents, but they must be weakened down first in order to do this. This category is pretty straightforward. Nero is strong in his own way, but Cinder has been outclassed. She has bear range, and her flight grants her bear mobility. The best advantage that Nero has is the Devil Trigger and his demonic arm, since Cinder's is basically a weaker version of the Devilbringer, and seems to hurt like a bitch when severed. His Devil Trigger will throw a wrench in Cinder's strategy due to him allowing to attack twice per every blow. Quantity-wise, Cinder has Fire Magic, Wind Blast, Explosive Weapons, and her aura can dampen damage or increase her attack potency. So I give Cinder the edge in special abilities. Just like all of my previous matches involving characters that use weapons, I'll be using Star Wars lightsaber fine forms to better analyze and illustrate a combatant's approach to combat. As a member of the Order of the Swords, due to facing swarms of demons, Nero will be trained in Form 1 Shisho and Form 5 Genso. Shisho trains a user to use wide sweeping strikes with groups of opponents. However, the form can be countered by a well-trained opponent. Form 5 Genso, on the other hand, trains a user to block before immediately counterattack with a devastating assault. As an overall combatant, Nero is a powerhouse. He mainly slams the opponent around with his Devilbringer, or cuts him down with his Red Queen sword. However, a more skilled opponent with better training such as Dante has shown to get around this. Cinder was trained by Rose, and from his training, she'll be trained in Form 4 Taro, Form 5 Genso, and Form 6 Nimon. Otaro trains a user to use acrobatics and aggression to overwhelm an opponent. However, the form isn't best used in close quarters. Form 5, on the other hand, trains the user to block or evade before immediately counterattacking with devastating assault, while Form 6 trains the user to be a jack of all trades but a master of none, that can only be taught after mastering all of the previous 5 forms, to use a user's both blade and force abilities, or in this case, Cinder's blade and magic. Cinder as tactician is a bit all over the place. On one hand, she's a cunning and level-headed combatant, being able to outduel both Winter and Penny, even after when Winter obtained the power of the Winter Maiden, and is capable of dual-wielding her swords in a Jarkai style. But she seems to let her anger get the better of her, and when this happens, she goes on a ferocious assault until her opponent is taken out. Much like the season finale, this is pretty simple, but it's the other way around. Nero facing someone like Cinder is a bit basic. Against a level-headed Cinder, Nero would be finding himself facing difficulties, but in terms of Genso, I'll give to Nero since it'll be a primary focus of his approach. If anything, he'll be better trained in the form. Other than that, Cinder is not only bringing a much more flexible approach and had more time to train, not in just her blade skills, but in the use of her magic as well. And one must remember, the reason why Nero did so well against Dante is because he didn't just underestimate him, but more seemed to be testing him. And anyone will admit that Dante is not just a better user of Shisho than Nero, but eclipses Nero as a combatant. But I will give Nero points for being a wiser combatant than Cinder when it comes to their magic and abilities, but that really won't take effect until the late stages of the fight, once Nero has a better feel for Cinder's fighting style. So in the meantime, I'll give Cinder the edge in combat skills and tactics. Let's just say that it takes place during the events of Volume 8, where Cinder learns from Neo about a source of power even greater than the Winter Maze. Deciding to kill two birds with one stone, Cinder accepts her offer, arriving in Mantle where Nero was having a strange day. First, the general had gone mad, threatening some huntresses that he doesn't even know, and also declared martial law. All that Nero cared about was getting the fuck out of Dodge, somehow. Nero thinks as he cuts down a few insect grimms. That was until a fireball blasted apart the head of a beowulf. Turning around, Nero spots Cinder. The boy thought about thanking her, but sensed an ominous aura from her. The Holy Knight sees Cinder eyeing his demonic arm and gets the idea. So, you demon? No, but you have something I want. In moments, the two close distance, with Cinder forming a broadsword and Nero drawing his Red Queen. The two direct blows, however, Nero goes to parry strike, but is met with a fireball to the face, disorienting him before he's being impaled by Cinder. Taking off guard when Nero looks up at her, grabbing her by the throat with his demonic arm, and tosses her into a building, forming a crater onto the wall. The two re-engage with standard swordplay. However, the Holy Knight is finding himself on the defense, but manages to get a few hits on Cinder, but non-fatal. Forming a second blade, Nero is taken off guard as Cinder adds more power into her strikes, but the man takes time to pick apart the boy's fighting style, landing various slashes on Nero as she goes to deliver another impalement. The son of Sparta takes the time to shoot Cinder with a charged up demonic shot, sending Cinder flying back. But the man used the momentum to fire off a volley of fireballs, but is proven futile when Nero dodges and blocks most of them. Nero closes distance for a quick combo, but Cinder takes flight, catching Nero by surprise only for a moment, who takes the time to fire off a few shots from his Blue Rose revolver, however misses, but in turn, the maiden counters with a series of fire pillars and wind blasts, but when the flames clear, Nero snatches Cinder out of the air and slams her around like a ragdoll. Quickly rebounding, Cinder finds it more easier to deal with Nero on the ground rather than in the air. Switching to her bow and arrow, the maiden fires off a number of explosive arrows, but the Holy Knight blocks a few arrows, but still takes the damage from the explosion. By now, Nero has grown tired of Cinder's cheap shots and abilities that he decided it's now or never. Closing distance, Nero dodges the arrows fired at him, forcing her to switch to her swords, but this time the hybrid parries Cinder's strikes before grabbing the man with his demonic arm to pull it in for an onslaught of power strikes. However, Cinder seems that the fight has gone long enough to channel her magic to amplify her physical performance. On the flip side of things, Nero is taken aback that the woman he's been face off against managed to push him on his back foot, and sees no other choice but to activate his double trigger. Cinder creates a blade of molten rock, but when the forces meet, Nero cleaves off Cinder's grim arm as the both combatants are burnt by the explosion of molten rock. Cinder gets to her knees as her grim arm grows back, laying out a growl of anger. The maiden rushes Nero, but it's futile when Nero gets another grab with his demonic arm, slamming her around whilst following us up with an onslaught of power strikes, taking off Cinder's arm before finally cutting her down. And with that, I declare Nero, the man with the demonic arm, the winner. Okay, I know what you're thinking. How the hell does Cinder still lose despite having most of the advantages? And it's actually quite simple. As a matter of fact, it's basically a similar reason why Nero won against Raven. He doesn't need to have better weapons or better magic than Cinder, he just needs to outlast her. Physically, despite Cinder having a speed advantage and having a decent amount of strength going at her, It's really nothing special. Even when facing a serious Dante, he still proved a challenge to him. Nero's Red Queen alone outclasses Cinder's weapons. Her symbols and elemental magic would just delay the inevitable, since at the flip of a switch, Nero can increase his damage output. And speaking of which, for those who've seen the Season 1 finale, knows exactly what the Yamao can do. Nero not being as effective as Virgil, he can still use it to get by. Despite Cinder being an uncompelling villain, I'll admit right now that she's a great combatant, while Nero prefers to plow through his opponents with aggression, which is something that Cinder will be able to pick apart, and much like Raven, he uses a rush-style offense, but due to being a demonic hybrid, Nero doesn't need to be a better fighter or have better range abilities. He just needs to chip away at her aura, waiting for the right time to take her out with his Devil Trigger or target a Grimm arm. That will send her over the edge into an enraged state, which would cause her to throw away her level-headed approach out the window and attack with everything she has. But this is just my opinion. Does Falme have what she needs in order to bring down the Son of Sparta, or does Nero have the ace cards in his hand to put down this power-hungry maiden once and for all? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter if you care about that, and I'll see you all next time.